The house had always been quiet, not fancy, not new, but comfortable in a way that mattered. It sat on a corner lot where the mornings were calm and the evenings smelled like cut grass and warm concrete. The homeowner had lived there for years, long enough to know which floorboard creaked and which neighbor watered the lawn too much. Nothing about life there suggested trouble was coming. That changed on a Tuesday afternoon. The homeowner had just returned from work, tired but relieved to be home. The sun was low, casting long shadows across the driveway. As they walked toward the front door, something white caught their eye. A thick envelope was taped right in the center of the door, pressed flat like it was meant to be impossible to miss. At first it seemed like regular mail, maybe a notice, maybe a flyer. But when it was peeled off and turned over, the bold lettering on the front made the stomach tighten. It was from the HOA. The Homeowners Association had always existed in the background. Monthly fees, occasional newsletters, polite reminders about trash bins or parking. Annoying at times, but manageable. This envelope felt different, heavier, more serious. Inside was a letter filled with stiff language and sharp demands. According to the HOA, the property was in violation of several community rules. The letter claimed there were unauthorized modifications and non-compliant usage of land connected to the home. The final line stood out the most. The homeowner had exactly 72 hours to correct the issues. 72 hours? No warning before this, no conversation, no inspection notice. Just a deadline and the promise of fines and legal action if it wasn't met. Standing there on the porch, the homeowner read the letter again, slower this time. The words didn't make more sense. In fact, they felt wrong. The accusations were vague. They referred to sections of HOA rules that sounded official, but didn't clearly explain what had been done wrong. One line mentioned land use beyond approved boundaries. That part didn't sit right. The homeowner knew the property well. Nothing had changed in years. No new fence, no new structure, no expansion. Everything was exactly how it had been when the house was purchased. Approved, inspected, and paid for. Inside the house, the letter was laid on the kitchen table. A cup of coffee went cold as the homeowner stared at it. There was confusion, but also something else creeping in. Quiet sense of being targeted. Why now? The next morning, the homeowner decided to call the HOA office. The number was listed at the bottom of the letter. After a long wait and tinny hold music, someone finally answered. The voice on the other end was short and firm. The homeowner calmly asked for clarification. What exactly was the violation? What part of the property was the issue? The response was cold. The HOA representative repeated what was written in the letter, almost word for word. When pressed for details, the tone shifted. A representative said the homeowner should already know the rules and that arguing wouldn't stop enforcement. Before the homeowner could respond, the call ended. That was the moment when unease turned into frustration. Later that day, a vehicle with HOA markings slowly drove past the house. It didn't stop, but it didn't need to. The message was clear. They were watching. By the second day, another letter arrived. This one was more aggressive. It reminded the homeowner of the deadline and listed possible penalties. Daily fines, legal fees, liens. The language felt designed to scare rather than inform. Neighbors noticed something was off. When asked casually if everything was okay, the homeowner smiled and said yes, not wanting to spread worry or drama. But inside, the pressure was building. That night, sleep came in short bursts. Every time. The homeowner closed their eyes, the words 72 hours replayed like a ticking clock. The fear wasn't just about money. It was about control. It's about someone else claiming power over a home that had been worked hard for. On the third morning, there was a knock at the door. 2 HOA board members stood outside. They wore polite smiles, but their eyes were sharp. One of them held a clipboard. The other glanced past the homeowner, scanning the yard like a detective. They said they were there to observe. The homeowner stepped outside, closing the door behind them. Calm was forced into the voice as questions were asked again. What exactly was the problem? What land were they talking about? One board member pointed toward a side area of the property. According to them, that section did not belong to the homeowner. They claimed it fell under HOA-controlled land and was being used improperly. The homeowner was stunned. That area had always been part of the property. It was included in the purchase documents, the tax assessments, everything. No one had ever questioned it before. When the homeowner said this, the board members exchanged a look. Then came the line that changed everything. "You have 72 hours to comply," one of them said. "After that, we proceed." No discussion, no review, no listening. As they walked away, one of them added that resisting would only make things worse. The homeowner stood there long after they were gone, heart pounding, hands clenched. Anger finally broke through the fear. Something about this felt deeply wrong, not just strict rules, but bullying. Inside, old files were pulled from drawers. Closing documents, surveys, maps, papers that hadn't been touched in years were spread across the dining table. The homeowner didn't know exactly what they were looking for yet, only that the answers had to be somewhere in ink and lines. The clock was ticking, but a decision had been made. Instead of tearing down anything or giving in, the homeowner chose to understand the truth first. Because if the HOA was wrong, this wasn't just about one letter. It was about standing up to something that had gone unchecked for too long. And somewhere between the papers and the quiet of the house, the fear began to shift into resolve. The papers stayed spread across the table all night. Some were old and yellow at the edges, others newer, but just as important. The homeowner sat there long after midnight, reading and rereading every page. Purchase records, property surveys, county maps. Each document told the same story, quietly but clearly. The land being questioned had always been part of the property. Still, doubt crept in. The HOA had spoken with such confidence. They acted like this was already decided, like the homeowner had no say at all. That kind of certainty made anyone question themselves. Even when the facts were right in front of them, by morning exhaustion settled in. The homeowner hadn't slept much, but there was no time to rest. The deadline was getting closer. Just under 48 hours remained. A decision was made to call the county office. The call took patience, transfers, waiting, being put on hold. Finally, someone from the records department came on the line. The homeowner explained the situation carefully, trying not to sound upset, just asking questions, just wanting clarity. The county official asked for the property address and parcel number. Keys clicked on a keyboard. There was a pause, then a simple sentence that changed the mood completely. "That land is part of your parcel." The homeowner asked them to repeat it. The official did, adding that the boundaries had not changed in decades. No transfers, no HOA ownership.
Oh, no.
Nothing unusual at all. A weight lifted, but it was replaced by something sharper. If the county records were clear, then the HOA had to know this too, or worse, they didn't care. That afternoon, the homeowner printed fresh copies of everything. Maps showing clear boundary lines. Records stamped with official seals. Each paper was proof, quiet and solid. Another HOA email arrived before sunset. Tone was harsher than before. Mentioned immediate action and warned that failure to comply would result in forced correction. The words felt threatening without directly saying so. The homeowner noticed something else this time. The email still didn't explain what exactly needed to be corrected. Just pressure, just fear. Neighbors started acting different. Some avoided eye contact, others whispered when passing by. One older neighbor finally spoke up while checking the mail. "They did this to someone else years ago," they said quietly. "Push them until they gave up. Easier that way." That comment stuck. The homeowner realized this wasn't just about rules. It was about power. HOA relied on people being too tired, too scared, or too busy to fight back. That night, another knock came at the door. This time, it was only one HOA representative. The smile was tight, almost forced. They said they were just checking progress. Their eyes moved again toward the side of the property, as if daring the homeowner to argue. The homeowner stayed calm, spoke slowly, asked again for written proof that the land belonged to the HOA. The representative brushed it off, said the HOA had internal documents, said county records could be outdated, said the homeowner should focus on compliance instead of questioning authority. That word lingered. Authority. After the door closed, Anger finally had space to breathe. Not loud anger, not shouting, the kind that settles deep and becomes steady. The homeowner sat down and wrote an email. Polite, professional, clear, it asked. The HOA to provide official proof of ownership and cited county records that showed otherwise. Copies of the documents were attached. The email was sent just before midnight. By morning, there was a reply. It was short, dismissive. The HOA claimed the matter was under review, but repeated the deadline anyway. No proof attached, no explanation. The homeowner felt something change inside. Fear was no longer in charge. That day was spent calling a legal clinic that offered short consultations. When the situation was explained, the response was immediate. If what you're saying is correct, the legal advisor said, they have no right to enforce anything on land they don't own. And giving deadlines like that can cross a line. The homeowner asked what to do next. Document everything, the advisor said. Every visit, every letter, every email, and don't remove or change anything yet. That advice brought clarity. Photos were taken of the property. Screenshots saved of emails. Notes written with dates and times. Even the tone of conversations was recorded while memories were fresh. As evening fell, another HOA vehicle passed slowly again. This time, the homeowner watched without flinching. The next morning marked the final 24 hours. A certified letter arrived before noon. This one claimed the HOA would hire a crew to correct the violation if the homeowner failed to act. The cost, of course, would be added to the homeowner's account. Reading it felt surreal. They were talking about stepping onto land they didn't own and charging money for it. Instead of panic, there was focus. The homeowner drove to the county office in person. Standing at the counter, maps were laid out. Questions were asked again. This time, written confirmation was requested. The staff understood immediately. An official letter was prepared, clearly stating property boundaries and ownership, stamped, signed, real, holding. That paper felt like holding ground itself, back home. The homeowner placed all documents in a neat folder. Copies were made. One for personal records, one for legal advice, one ready for the HOA. As the sun went down, a sense of calm settled in. The house felt different now. Still quiet, but stronger somehow. The deadline would end the next day, and for the first time since that envelope appeared on the door, the homeowner wasn't counting the hours with fear. They were counting on the truth. The final morning arrived quietly. No alarms, no dramatic sounds, just the soft light coming through the window. The homeowner woke up earlier than usual, not because of fear this time, but because the mind was already moving. Today was the last day of the deadline. The official letter from the county sat on the kitchen table, right on top of everything else. It was clean, clear, and impossible to twist. The land belonged to the homeowner. Always had. Always would unless sold. There was no confusion in it. No soft language. Just facts. Coffee was poured but barely touched. Instead, the homeowner stood by the window and watched the street. A few neighbors left for work. Someone walked a dog. Life moved on like nothing unusual was happening, even though everything felt different inside that house. Around mid-morning, an email notification sounded. It was from the HOA. The message repeated the same warnings. It stated that if the violation was not corrected by the end of the day, enforcement action would begin immediately. There was still no proof attached. No ownership documents. Just pressure, the homeowner replied calmly. The county letter was attached this time, along with a short message asking one simple question. Please explain how the HOA has authority over land confirmed by the county as privately owned. The email was sent. Screenshots were taken. Everything was saved. Hours passed with no response. Just after noon, a truck pulled up in front of the house. It wasn't marked clearly, but the homeowner recognized it from earlier drive-bys. Two people stepped out, both holding folders. They didn't look relaxed. They looked like they were there to finish something. The homeowner stepped outside. Before they could knock, the conversation stayed civil, but tense. The HOA representatives claimed they were there to review compliance. When asked again for proof of HOA ownership, one of them hesitated. The other spoke instead, saying the matter was still under internal review, but the deadline still stood. That was when the homeowner handed them copies of the county documents. The mood changed immediately. They read the pages silently. One of them frowned. The other flipped through the maps, tracing lines with a finger. Neither said much. There was no apology, no acknowledgement, just quiet discomfort. One of them finally said the HOA would get back. To the homeowner, they left without another word. The homeowner stood in the yard for a long moment after they were gone. Hands steady, heart calm. It felt like standing in the middle of a turning point, even if the outcome wasn't fully clear yet. An hour later, the phone rang. This time, it wasn't a representative. It was someone higher up in the HOA office. The tone was smoother, more careful. They said they had received the documents and needed time to verify everything. The homeowner asked why the deadline was still being enforced if ownership was in question. There was a pause, the caller said. Enforcement would be temporarily paused. Temporarily, that word didn't sit well. The homeowner didn't argue, just thanked them and ended the call. Then the legal advisor was contacted again. The update was shared. The advisor listened and then said something important. If they pause enforcement after seeing proof, it means they know they're on thin ground. But don't assume they'll do the right thing on their own. That warning mattered. That afternoon, the homeowner noticed something new. A neighbor across the street walked over, cautious but curious. They asked what was going on. The homeowner explained. Briefly and honestly, the neighbor nodded slowly. They tried something like that with us once, they said. Not land, but fines. We paid because we didn't know better. Another neighbor joined the conversation. Then another. Stories began to surface. Small ones. Quiet ones. Letters. Threats. People giving in because it was easier. Listening to them made something clear. This wasn't just a mistake. It was a pattern. As evening came, another email arrived. This one was different. It stated that the HOA was conducting a formal review and asked the homeowner not to make any changes to the property until it was completed. The homeowners smiled at that line they hadn't planned to change anything anyway. The reply was simple. It confirmed no changes had been made and repeated that the HOA had no authority over the land in question. The county documents were attached again. Night fell slowly. The house felt steady, strong. The stress that once filled every room was fading, replaced by a quiet confidence. The deadline passed at midnight. Nothing happened. No crews. No fines. No emergency notices. The next morning, the homeowner woke up to silence again. But this silence felt earned. By mid-morning, another email came through. This time, the language was noticeably softer. The HOA acknowledged discrepancies in their records. They stated that enforcement actions were being suspended until further notice. Suspended, still no apology. Still no admission. But the threat was gone. The homeowner forwarded the message to the legal advisor. The response came quickly. This is where things turn, the advisor said. They backed off. But now there's a record of wrongful enforcement. That matters. The homeowner took a deep breath. The situation wasn't over yet. But the balance had shifted. For the first time, it was clear that the HOA was reacting instead of controlling. And that realization changed everything. The homeowner stepped outside and looked at the property again. The same grass. The same land. Nothing had moved. Nothing had changed. Except the understanding of how his Lee power could be misused, and how important it was to question it. The fight wasn't finished, but it was no longer one-sided. The pause from the HOA didn't bring full relief. It brought watchfulness. The homeowner knew better now than to relax too soon. Silence from an organization like that usually meant something was happening behind closed doors. Days passed. Then a week, no new letters arrived, but the feeling of being watched never fully went away. The homeowner noticed the HOA truck again one afternoon, parked a little farther down the street than before. It stayed for a few minutes, then drove off. No one got out. No one waved. It felt like someone checking a board before making a move, instead of reacting. The homeowner stayed focused. Every document was kept in order. Every email was backed up. A small notebook sat on the counter where times, dates, and details were written down. Even small things were noted. A slow drive-by. A phone call that rang once and stopped. It all mattered now. One morning, a new email arrived from the HOA. It was carefully worded and longer than the others. It said the board had completed an internal review and identified clerical inconsistencies regarding property boundaries. It claimed the issue stemmed from outdated maps used during enforcement. The email ended with a line that stood out. The HOA regrets any inconvenience. It wasn't an apology. It didn't admit wrongdoing. But it was the first time the HOA had ever hinted at fault. The homeowner read it twice, then forwarded it to the legal advisor. The reply came back with a clear tone. This confirms they enforced rules without proper authority. That opens the door to accountability. The word felt heavy. Accountability. The homeowner hadn't planned on pushing back this far. At first the goal was simple. Protect the home. Stop the threat. But now it was clear this situation was bigger. The HOA had crossed a line not just with one person, but likely with others too. Later that day, a certified letter arrived. This one was different from the earlier threats. The language was formal and cautious. It stated that all previous violation notices were officially withdrawn. Any fines associated with them were canceled. The HOA confirmed there would be no further enforcement related to the disputed land. On the surface, it looked like a victory, but something was missing. There was no mention of the stress. No acknowledgement of the intimidation. No responsibility for the repeated threats or the rushed deadline. The legal advisor explained it simply. They're trying to end it quietly. That protects them, not you. The homeowner thought about the sleepless nights, the fear, the pressure, the way neighbors had looked away because they didn't want trouble. None of that was erased by a withdrawn notice. A choice had to be. May it let it go and move on, or speak up and make sure this didn't happen. Again, the homeowner chose the second option, a formal response. Was sent to the HOA. It was calm and factual. It stated that the homeowner had suffered undue stress due to wrongful enforcement and demanded reimbursement for legal consultation costs and time lost. The letter also requested confirmation that HOA records would be corrected to prevent future issues. The letter wasn't angry, it was firm. The HOA responded 2 days later. This time, the tone changed again. The email suggested a resolution meeting to discuss the matter further. It didn't say where or when, only that the HOA wanted to resolve concerns amicably. The homeowner agreed, but only under one condition. All communication had to be documented. The meeting was scheduled for the following week. Word began to spread quietly through the neighborhood. Neighbors asked questions now, not whispers anymore. Open conversations. Some thanked the homeowner for standing up. Others shared stories they had never told before. One neighbor said the HOA once fined them for something that turned out not to be a violation at all. Another said they removed part of their yard because they were threatened with legal action. None of them had fought. Back until now, the day of the meeting arrived. It was held in a plain room with a long table and uncomfortable chairs. Several HOA board members were present. So was their legal representative. Everyone smiled politely, but the tension was clear. The homeowner brought a folder. Inside were all the documents neatly organized. County records, emails, letters, notes, photos. The meeting started with the HOA explaining how the mistake happened. They blamed old records, staff changes, miscommunication. The words sounded rehearsed. When it was the homeowner's turn to speak, there was no raised voice. No emotion on display. Just facts: the rush deadline, the repeated threats, the refusal to provide proof, the intimidation disguised as enforcement. Each point was laid out clearly. The room grew quiet. Then the homeowner asked a simple question: how many other homeowners were treated the same way? No one answered right away. The HOA representative shifted in their chair and said the board was not aware of similar cases. But their tone lacked confidence. The homeowner didn't press further. The point had already landed. The legal advisor spoke next. They explained that wrongful enforcement could lead to serious consequences if challenged formally, not just reimbursement. Broader review of HOA practices. That changed everything. The meeting ended with no final decision, but the mood had shifted. The HOA no longer held control. They were defending themselves now. 2 days later, a new letter arrived. The HOA agreed to reimburse the homeowner for documented expenses related to the enforcement issue. They also agreed to update their records and issue a written notice confirming the property boundaries. It wasn't everything, but it was enough. More importantly, it was in writing. The homeowner accepted the resolution, not because the HOA deserved mercy, but because the point had been made, loudly, clearly, permanently, in the days that followed. Something unexpected happened. The HOA sent out a general notice to the neighborhood, announcing a review of enforcement procedures. They encouraged homeowners to report concerns and promised greater transparency. Neighbors noticed, so did the homeowner. The house returned to its quiet rhythm. Mornings felt lighter. Evenings felt calm again. But the homeowner wasn't the same person who had opened that first envelope. They had learned something important. Power only works when people don't question. The HOA had given 72 hours to scare someone into silence. Instead, they had been forced to face their own mistake, and the cost of that mistake was no longer invisible. Life slowly returned to normal, but it did not return to how it was before. Something had shifted, not just in the neighborhood, but inside the homeowner as well. The house was the same. The land was the same, but the feeling of ownership was deeper now. Stronger than it had ever been. A few weeks passed without a single message from the HOA. No letters. No emails. No slow drive-bys. The silence felt real this time, not the kind that hides another threat. It felt like closure. One afternoon, a final envelope arrived. It was thinner than the others and much less intimidating. Inside was a check covering the agreed expenses and a signed statement confirming the corrected property records. The words were simple, almost careful, as if written by someone who did not want to take another wrong step. The homeowner placed the documents in a folder and slid it into a drawer. It felt good knowing they were there, not because they might be needed again, but because they represented something earned. Outside, neighbors began stopping by more often. Not to gossip, not to complain, but to talk openly. One asked how the homeowner had stayed calm through it all. Another asked where to find their own property records. Some just said thank you, quietly, like they had been holding those words back for years. One neighbor admitted they had paid fines they never should have. Another said they removed part of their fence because they were scared of legal threats. Hearing those stories was hard, but it also made something clear. Standing up had mattered even beyond one house. The HOA noticed the change too. Their newsletters became more polite. Their language softened. Enforcement notices now included clear explanations and references. Meetings were announced earlier, and homeowners were encouraged to attend. It wasn't perfect, but it was different. One evening, while walking along the edge of the property that had caused so much trouble, the homeowner stopped and looked around. The grass moved gently in the breeze. Nothing dramatic, nothing special. Just land that had always been theirs. It was strange to think how close it had come to being taken, not physically, but through pressure and fear. The HOA had assumed compliance. They had counted on silence. Instead, they found resistance. The homeowner didn't feel proud in a loud way. There was no victory dance, no celebration. The feeling was quieter than that. It was the calm that comes after choosing not to be pushed. Months later, a new family moved into the neighborhood. During a casual conversation, they mentioned being nervous about HOA rules. The homeowner smiled and said something simple. Read everything. Ask questions. And don't assume they're always right. That advice felt earned. Looking back, the homeowner realized the hardest part wasn't the paperwork or the deadlines. It was the moment when fear tried to take control. The moment when it would have been as time moved forward. The story didn't fade the way the homeowner expected. Instead, it settled into the neighborhood like a quiet memory people carried with them. Not something dramatic, but something grounding. A reminder that what happened mattered. The HOA continued holding open meetings. Attendance stayed higher than before. People asked questions without fear of sounding foolish. Some even brought printed documents with them, something that rarely happened in the past. The board members noticed. Their responses became slower, more careful. They explained instead of ordered. The homeowner sat quietly during most meetings now. There was no need to speak often. Just being there felt enough. One afternoon, a neighbor knocked on the door. They looked nervous, but hopeful. They held a folded paper in their hand, shaking it slightly. "I got this notice," they said. "It doesn't feel right." The homeowner invited them in, offered a chair, and read the letter calmly. It was vague, heavy on warnings, light on facts. The same kind of language that had once caused sleepless nights. Instead of panic, the homeowner felt clarity. They explained how to read the notice, what to check, where to verify information. No advice was forced, just guidance. The neighbor left lighter than they arrived. Moments like that began happening more often. Quiet conversations, shared experiences, no drama. Just people helping people understand their rights. The homeowner never thought of themselves as brave. Still didn't, but it became clear that courage can be contagious in small ways. One calm conversation can stop fear from spreading. The HOA adjusted again. New notices included clear deadlines and clear explanations. Appeals were mentioned openly. Property maps were updated and shared. None of this erased the past, but it showed growth. One evening, while cleaning out old files, the homeowner found the original envelope. The first one, the one taped to the door. The paper felt thinner now. Less powerful, they thought about throwing it away. Instead, they placed it back in the folder, not as a reminder of fear, but as proof of resilience. Life didn't change dramatically after that. No news articles, no big speeches, just normal days filled with work, rest, and small joys. But something inside stayed different. The homeowner trusted themselves more. They trusted their ability to pause, to question, to stand still when pushed. That confidence showed up in other parts of life too. At work, in conversations, in decisions that once felt overwhelming. Standing up once made standing up again easier. One night, during a quiet walk through the neighborhood, the homeowner passed the same stretch of land that had caused so much trouble. The moonlight made it look ordinary, peaceful. It was strange how something so simple had become. The center of such pressure, the homeowner smiled softly. Power had tried to move faster than truth. Truth had simply waited, and in the end, truth didn't have to shout, it just had to exist. The HOA never admitted everything openly. That wasn't surprising. But their actions told enough of the story. Their rules became clearer. Their enforcement slower and fairer. Most importantly, their fear tactics stopped working. The homeowner returned home that night feeling something close to gratitude. Not for the stress, but for the lesson. For learning that calm resistance can be stronger than loud obedience. The 72 hours had long passed, but the impact remained not as fear as strength, and that strength stayed. Quietly, exactly where it belonged. Easier to tear something down. Pay a fine and move on. But easy doesn't always mean right. The HOA had given 72 hours, believing that time pressure would break someone down. Instead, it had given clarity. It forced attention. It forced truth to come to the surface. And in the end, it was the HOA that paid the price. Not just in money, but in credibility. The homeowner went back to enjoying the small things. Morning coffee by the window. Quiet evenings. Friendly waves to neighbors who now felt more like a community than before. The house felt lighter, like it could breathe again. The experience left a lesson that stayed close. Rules matter, But authority must be earned. Paperwork matters. But truth matters more, and standing up, even when your voice shakes, can change more than just your own outcome. The HOA never tried anything like that again, not with this homeowner, and not with anyone else on that street. The 72 hours meant to intimidate became a reminder instead. Reminder that even quiet people can draw firm lines, and when they do, those who tried to push them often end up paying for it. Time passed in a quiet way, the kind that feels slow but steady. Weeks turned into months, and the tension that once filled the house became a distant memory. Still, the experience had left a mark. Not a scar, but a reminder. The homeowner noticed it in small moments, like when opening mail or hearing a car slow down outside. There was awareness now, but not fear. One morning, a notice appeared on the community bulletin board near the mailbox area. It announced an open HOA meeting. The tone was different from before. It invited homeowners to attend, ask questions, and review recent changes in enforcement procedures. That alone felt unusual. The homeowner almost ignored it. Life was peaceful again, and part of them wanted to leave the past alone. But another part knew that silence was what allowed problems to grow in the first place, so they decided to go. The meeting room wasn't full, but it wasn't empty either. More people showed up than usual. Some sat quietly. Others whispered to each other. The HOA board members sat at the front, looking careful, almost guarded. When the meeting began, the board spoke about transparency, about learning from mistakes, about improving communication. The words sounded right. The room stayed quiet. Then something unexpected happened. A homeowner stood up and shared their experience. A small issue that had turned into a big threat. Another person spoke next, then another. Each story was different, but the pattern was the same. Confusion, pressure, fear. The homeowner listened, heart steady, realizing this was no longer just their story. It never really had been. When it was their turn to speak, they kept it simple. No drama, no blame. Just facts. What happened? What was learned? What changed? They ended with one sentence that stayed in the room. Rules should protect people, not scare them. No one clapped. No one argued. But the board listened. After that meeting, things continued to shift. The HOA updated its website. Clear explanations replaced vague warnings. Maps were posted. Contact information was easier to find. Even the tone of emails changed. Less commanding. More respectful. One afternoon, the homeowner received a message from someone on the board. It wasn't defensive or cold. It thanked them for bringing attention to the issue and admitted that the situation had forced changes. That should have happened long ago. Reading that message felt strange, not victorious, just real. Around the neighborhood, people seemed lighter. Conversations felt more open. Neighbors waved more often. Some even laughed about how stressed they used to feel whenever the HOA sent a letter. The homeowner noticed something else too. New homeowners seemed less afraid. They asked questions early. They checked documents. They didn't panic when something didn't sound right. That change mattered. One evening, while sitting on the porch as the sun went down, the homeowner thought back to the moment that first envelope was pulled from the door. How heavy it had felt. How quickly peace had turned into pressure. It was hard to believe. How much had come from those 72 hours. What stood out most wasn't the paperwork or the meetings. It was the moment of choice. The moment when giving up would have been easier than standing firm. That moment didn't feel heroic at the time. It felt terrifying. But looking back, it was the moment everything turned. The homeowner realized something important then. Courage doesn't always show up as confidence. Sometimes it shows up as staying still when someone wants you to move, as asking questions when someone wants silence, as waiting for truth instead of rushing to obey. The house remained the same place it had always been. A place of rest. A place of routine. But now it also felt like proof. Proof that ordinary people don't need loud voices to protect what's theirs. They just need to pay attention from time to time. A new HOA notice would arrive. The homeowner would read it calmly, checking details, understanding rights. There was no longer a knot in the stomach. Just awareness. The fear was gone. Not because the HOA became perfect, but because knowledge replaced uncertainty. That, more than anything, was the real outcome. The homeowner never set out to make a statement, never planned to change anything beyond their own situation. But standing up had created space for others to do the same, and that space stayed. Long after the letters stopped coming, long after the deadline, passed long after the 72, hours became just another number in a story about what happens when someone decides they won't be pushed anymore.